The kids are finally in bed, and you found yourself a stolen moment to do some practice. You scuttle down to the computer and pop on YouTube. Where should you start? Scales? Chords? No, let's work on some improvising. But is it even possible to see improvement in just 10 minutes? Yes, it most certainly is, and I'm going to show you exactly what to do. This channel is all about distilling the concepts of jazz guitar into the most clear and simple steps so that you can make progress even with a small amount of daily practice. If you like this idea, give us a follow and watch on. As adults with families and responsibilities, it's often difficult to find an uninterrupted hour in which to pick up your guitar. What if you can only seize 10 minutes in an evening? Is that enough? If so, how should you spend it? Worthy questions. Now, the following video has 3 components. First, I'm going to explain the concepts we'll be covering and talk about how we'll organize our practice session for maximum efficiency. After that, I'm going to explain the elements of the exercise we'll be using during our practice session and why they're important. Lastly, you and I are going to go through our 10-minute practice session together in real time, so you'll see exactly what it looks like. Now first, let's examine the basics. In order to improvise a jazz solo, we're going to have to know our scales, particularly the major scale. Now I'm going to go ahead and assume that you're somewhat familiar with the major scale and the cage system, which outlines how the major scale fits along the guitar neck. Now, 10 minutes is not an enormous amount of time, but it's still very possible to make significant progress, particularly if you do 10 minutes consistently. That means every day. The key to utilizing such a short segment is to get organized and be very specific about what we work on. We want to laser focus on a single key area instead of trying to cram too much in. For our purposes of learning to improvise, we're going to focus on the major scale in a single cage position. Now I'm going to choose the C major scale in the E position, which happens up here at the 7th fret, and it looks like this. Now if you'd like some tabs to follow along with me, you can pause the video and download them from the link below. Now, if we're going to practice improvising, using our major scale, we'll need some chords to play over. We've all heard of the 2-5-1, that ubiquitous progression that seems to crop up in every jazz standard. Since it's such an important component of jazz, let's master it. However, as we've said, we've got limited time, so I'm going to simplify our 2-5-1 by cutting out the 2 chord and focusing just on the 5 and the 1 chords only. This process of simplifying concepts or pieces into smaller components is called chunking, and we're going to use it to pare down our material to something we can achieve in a 10-minute slot. Now these 2 chords, the 5 and the 1, together make up what musicians call a perfect cadence, and you'll find it in everything from classical music to rock and roll. It's the resolution from the 5 chord to the 1 chord that creates the characteristic tension and release in the 2-5-1 progression, so it's important to get comfortable with improvising over these 2 chords. In fact, we can think of the 2 chord in a 2-5-1 kind of like an embellishment at the start of a perfect cadence. It adds an extra flavor, but it's not quite as crucial as the other 2, so I don't want you to worry about skipping over it for now. Okay, now we have a scale, a position on the neck, and a progression to practice. Now what do we do? Let's look at each of our 2 chords and see how they fit into our caged position. Now in the key of C, our 1 chord is C major. The C major chord, just like any other chord, is comprised of 3 notes, the root, the 3rd, and the 5th of the scale. A 3-note chord like this is referred to as a triad and is the simplest form a chord can take. The notes of our C major triad are C, E, and G, and if we look for them within our E caged position up at the 7th fret here, we find them here, C, E, G, here, C, E, G, and then one final C on top. Now, if we put them all together, it gives us a 2-octave C major arpeggio that looks like this. C, E, G, C, E, G, C. By the way, don't forget there are tabs linked below if you'd like to see these notes written down. Now, this 2-octave C major arpeggio moves across all 6 strings, and it's a little unwieldy. So I want to zoom in on what we call triad inversions. As we stated, a triad is the simplest chord there is, consisting of the root, third, and the fifth. But each triad can be played in 3 different orders or inversions, beginning with one of each of the 3 notes in the chord. For example, the notes in our C chord can be played beginning with C, followed by E and G, as we've already done. Because we're starting with the root note of our triad C, this is called root inversion. However, we could also play this triad starting on the next note, E, followed by G, and ending with our root note C on top. This reshuffling to begin with the third of our triad is called first inversion. Now, following this logic, we can guess that the next inversion, the second inversion, would begin with G, the fifth, and will be followed by the notes C and then E. So our 3 inversions look like this: root inversion, first inversion, and second inversion. Now, learning triads and their inversions is a great way to visualize how each chord fits into a particular cage shape. So each triad will be mapped across 2 or 3 string sets and is therefore very helpful for thoroughly learning each section of the arpeggio. So let's look at how our C chord inversions fit into our E cage shape here at the 7th fret. We've got, as we've just done, root inversion, first inversion, second inversion. Then we move on to our second octave. We've got root inversion and first inversion. If you put these triads together and put our root note on the bottom, gives you our classic bar chord shape. Okay. Now we've got the concepts, we're going to do exactly the same thing for our 5 chord, which is G. So the G major triad consists of the notes G, B, and D. Still sticking to our E cage shape up here at the 7th fret, let's see how the notes of the G major triad map out across all 6 strings. So we go up to our 5th note of the scale, C, D, E, F, G. There's our root note of our G chord. And we'll grab G, B, D. Then we've got G, B, and D. Now you notice I started that arpeggio on the 5th string, on our root note at the 10th fret, but we've also got this lonely bottom string here that we haven't touched. We've got 2 notes from our triad here as well. We've got B and D. So let's include those. Our full arpeggio looks like this. Now, let's simplify further with our inversions. If we started on the note B down here at the 7th fret of the E string, this is our 3rd of our G triad. So that's going to be our first inversion. There's first inversion. Then we go up here to D. There's our second inversion. You can also play it like this. Then we're back to our root inversion. If we keep going up the next octave, we've got first inversion, second inversion, and finally we're back to root inversion again, here on the top. And if we put all these little triad inversions together, we get this shape here, which is like a C major chord. If you imagine a capo here at the 7th fret, playing a C major chord here. So there's our G. G chord, moving to our root C chord. Okay, now that we have our 5 chord and our 1 chord triads and their inversions mapped, we're ready to begin our improvisation practice. The reason we first want to learn our 1 and our 5 arpeggio inversions is because the notes contained in these triads are the strongest notes that you can use in your improvisations over the 5-1 progression, and they're crucial for the development of strong melody and coherence when soloing. Musicians refer to these notes as chord tones, and being able to navigate between them as we solo is one of the most crucial skills. So we're going to focus our practice on shifting between these chord tones using an exercise we call chord tone resolutions. The rules of this exercise are simple. Sticking with a single inversion of our 5 triad, we're going to play the chord tones from that triad in ascending order for 1 bar. Because we have 3 notes in our triad, but 4 beats in a bar, the rhythm we'll use will be quarter, quarter, half note, which sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, quarter, quarter, half. At the beginning of the next bar, we're going to switch to the chord tones from our 1 chord, the C major. What we want to do, and this is crucial to this exercise, is grab the closest available chord tone from our C major triad and come down the notes of that inversion. So, for example, we'll begin with this G triad and root inversion on the top 2 strings. We walk up G, B, D, playing our quarter, quarter, half note. When we reach that top note D, we're going to hunt for the closest available note from our C chord. Now in this position, it happens to be the root note, C, right here. So for our next bar, we're going to start on C and we're going to descend down that inversion of C major, going C, G, E. Now let's look at that again and you can try playing along. So, root inversion of our G triad, G, B, D, grabbing our closest available chord tone, which is C, and coming down, C, G, E. Now, because repetition is a crucial element to practice, we want to make sure we repeat this resolution to really cement it into our eyes, ears, and fingers. So we're going to do it 4 times in a row. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Once we've done our 4 reps, we're going to move to the next inversion of our G chord, the 5 chord, which will be the second inversion right here. Okay, we're going to walk up the notes of that triad. We're going to go D, G, B. And when we get to the B, which is the top note of that inversion, we're going to hunt for the closest available chord tone from the C chord. Now, you notice when we get here, we have the option to go back up to our C, our root note from our 1 chord, and come down the very same inversion we've just played. But we also have a second option. Instead of going up to that C note, we can come down to the next available chord tone from our C major triad. And it goes like this. We're going to go down to that G. So we can either resolve up to the next chord tone or down. We want to make sure we practice both options, so in our exercise, we'll do each one 4 times in a row. Now, we continue by starting on the next inversion of our G chord, which is the first inversion. This presents us with yet another option. You'll notice that when we reach the top note of that inversion, G, which is the root note of the G major, it also happens to be the fifth of our C triad. Now this is what we call a common chord tone. So what we're going to do is we're going to stay put, and we're going to play our root inversion of our C chord coming down. So if we look at that again, we go up first inversion of G, we land on G, which is our common chord tone, and we're going to come down from our G, we'll stay put and come down the root inversion of our C triad. Now, our second option is to grab the next note lower, which is E. Now, we didn't grab the higher note C because it's a fourth away from G and it's a bit less suitable for a smooth chord tone resolution. So we'll go instead down to our E. So our two options here are staying put or resolving down. Now again, make sure you look at the tabs if this is confusing. In our exercise, we'll repeat each of these options 4 times. So now we have 3 options for resolving our chord tones. When we get to the last note of our inversion of our G chord, we can either go up to the next available chord tone, down to the next available chord tone, or in the case of this inversion here, we stay put on G, which is the common chord tone. What we're learning as we do this is how to navigate fluidly between the G chord and the C chord, or the 5 and the 1, using any of the chord tones of the 5 chord, moving to any of the available chord tones of the 1 chord. As we do this exercise repetitively, our eyes, ears, and fingers naturally begin to learn how to perform these resolutions, and it becomes an automatic process bordering on telepathic. It's knowledge of these chord tone resolutions that makes players like Charlie Parker or Bill Evans seem like mad geniuses. In reality, it's 99% practice and only 1% genius. Okay, let's continue to the rest of the inversions and see how each of these options map out in our cage position here. So, our next option for our G chord is the root inversion. Once we get to this D note here, we can go up to our next available chord tone from C, which is E, and come down our inversion of C, our second inversion of C. So we're going up G and down, up G and up to E to come down our C triad. Our next option, using that same inversion of G, is to resolve down to our root note. And there's our first inversion of C. So we go up, down. Okay, again, in our exercise that follows, we're going to do each of these options 4 times in a row. So we'll go up, do 4 times, and down we'll do 4 times. Our next inversion of our G chord is the second inversion. And if we resolve up to the next chord tone for C, we'll find our very same C inversion that we've just used previously, first inversion. So that resolution will be going up to C here, and coming down. And then our second option will be going down to the 5th of C. Make sense? Okay, now our final inversion of our G chord is our first inversion here, starting on B, D, G, and as we see here, we're ending on G again, so this is our common chord tone. So we're going to stay put and come down the root inversion of our C. Now, our only other option would be to resolve down to the next chord tone from C. So let's see what that looks like. We end on the G and we want to resolve down. The next available chord tone from C is E. And this would be our second inversion of C major, which would take us down to the G at the 3rd fret of the E string. That takes us out of our little caged position here. So we're gonna just dismiss that, but we'll still practice this resolution. We're just gonna stay put in our caged shape here and not move down to that G chord, or that G note. So we're gonna go and just stay there, okay? Now, one of the most helpful things we can do when practicing this exercise is to use a backing track, which will help to keep the tempo and outline the 5 and the 1 chords over which we're playing. Okay, you've made it this far. Now we're gonna play through in earnest. If you still feel unfamiliar with the concept of inversions, please go back over the last section until it begins to feel comfortable. Also, don't forget to download the accompanying tabs, which will help enormously. So now we're playing our exercise. We're gonna set a timer for 10 minutes, then play our backing track at a slow tempo, playing our guide tone resolutions 4 times in a row for each inversion. For the tones that can resolve both up and down, we'll do each option 4 times. So 4 times up, 4 times down. For those that can stay put with our common chord tone, we'll do that option 4 times, followed by the resolution going down 4 times. So let's practice this together for the next 10 minutes. Here we go. Next inversion, resolving up. Now resolving down. Next inversion. Common tone, so stay there. Now resolve down. Next inversion. Now resolving down. Next inversion. Going up. our final inversion, common tone, so stay there. Now our last resolution, it's incomplete. We go down to the root and we stay there. Okay, now we're going to do the whole sequence again, starting from the top. Here we go. Moving down to the next inversion, resolving up to C. Now resolving down. Next inversion, common tone. Now resolving down. Inversion. Resolving down. Inversion. Resolving down. Okay, last inversion. Common tone, so stay there. Now our last incomplete resolution. let's stop there. Okay, the timer's gone off, so let's immediately stop. As we said at the beginning, guide tones and the resolutions are crucial for us to be able to create melody and coherence in our solos. The idea of this exercise is to drill in these resolutions so they become automatic, and as soon as you land on a note and the chord changes, your ears will hear the next closest guide tone and resolve your fingers automatically. This may sound magical, but this is what jazz players are doing all the time when they improvise, and their ability comes from the slow and regular practice of this very exercise. The nice thing about this exercise is that it will improve your soloing no matter what the genre. For example, the use of guide tones can improve your melodic rock playing, making you sound like players such as Brian May from Queen. I'd recommend trying this exercise for about a week or two, as soon as you begin to notice the resolutions becoming second nature. As soon as you've mastered the resolutions of these 3-note triads, it'll be time to add an extra note to make 7th chords. And this is when things will get even more interesting. But that's another topic for another video. Now, if you'd like to know more about guide tones and improvising practice, I have a 30-day course which will take you from a rock and blues player to a confident improvising jazz guitarist with about 40 minutes of guided practice per day and a proven trajectory for improvement. The link is in the description below. In the meantime, hit the subscribe button below for updates and more jazz practice tips. Thank you, Jazzers, and keep shedding and shredding.